6 months ago, a woman looked me up and down in a store just like this one, her lips curling into a smirk, and told me I was too fat to even exist in her world. Today I own that world, and she's the one begging me for a job in it. Hi everyone. For those of you who are new here, I'm a girl who spent most of her life apologizing for the space I take up. My name is Maya. I'm 25 years old, and I'm from the city where it feels like you can be anything you want, unless you're fat. Then it feels like the world has already decided what you are, and it isn't much. The story I'm about to tell you is one I've locked away in the deepest, darkest vault of my heart. Seriously. I've replayed it in my mind 1,000 times, each time feeling that same hot flush of shame, that same suffocating wave of humiliation. I almost didn't share it, I really didn't. Because for the longest time I believed what they said about me. I believed I wasn't good enough, that I was unworthy, that my body was a public failure for everyone to judge. I felt like a mistake in a world full of perfect people. That feeling, it's a poison. It seeps into everything, tainting your thoughts, your dreams, your very sense of self, until you start to believe that shrinking yourself, both physically and emotionally, is the only way to survive. But this isn't just a story about pain. It's a story about what happens when you're pushed so far past your breaking point that you don't just break, you detonate. It's a story about taking every single piece of that shattered self and forging it into a weapon, into armor, into a crown. It's about the moment I stopped seeing myself through the contemptuous eyes of others and finally saw the queen who had been buried underneath all that pain and self-doubt. I want to be completely honest with you all. The journey was hell. There were tears. There were moments I wanted to give up. There were days I felt so weak I could barely get out of bed. But the fire that was lit inside me on that day, oh, that fire burned brighter than any of my fears. It was a fire fueled by pure, righteous anger. And let me tell you, sometimes anger isn't a bad thing. Sometimes it's the only thing that can save you. It's the voice that finally screams, I've had enough. Just because I was fat, did I deserve to be humiliated? Just because my body didn't fit into a certain size, did that mean my dreams had to be smaller too? Did it mean my worth was less? For 24 years, a part of me had quietly, unconsciously, accepted that it did. I walked with my shoulders hunched. I avoided eye contact. I wore black not as a style choice, but as camouflage. I was trying to disappear. But that one day, that one comment from one person, a person who meant nothing to me, somehow became everything. Her words weren't just words. They were a mirror, reflecting back at me every insecurity, every fear, every cruel joke, every pitying look I had ever endured. It was the final crushing weight that could have either buried me for good or, paradoxically, given me the strength to throw everything off and rise. I know there are so many of you out there who have felt this. Maybe it wasn't a shop girl. Maybe it was a classmate, a family member, a so-called friend, or even a stranger on the internet. But you know the feeling. That sharp, stabbing pain of being judged and dismissed based on your appearance. That feeling of your spirit shrinking inside your own body. You feel like you're screaming, but no one can hear you. I see you. I hear you. And I'm telling you this story for you. Before I take you back to that day, to the moment my old life ended and my new one began, I need to ask you for a small favor. If my story, even just this little piece of it so far, resonates with you, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. It might seem like a small click, but for me, and for our community here, it's a signal. It's a signal that we are not alone, that our stories matter, and that our voices deserve to be heard. Your support gives me the courage to open up this vault and share the raw, painful, and ultimately triumphant truth. It reminds me why I'm doing this. Okay. Are you ready? Let's go back. Let's go back to the before the fire, before the counterattack. Let's go back to a girl named Naya, who thought her life was destined to be lived in the shadows. My story, the real story of this transformation, starts not with a bang, but with a quiet, monotonous rhythm. It begins about a year ago, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday in October. The kind of day you forget the moment it's over. The sky was a flat, boring gray. The air had that damp, pre-winter chill that seeps into your bones. And I was sitting at my desk, in a cubicle that was indistinguishable from the 50 others in the open plan office. I had a job in data entry for a massive, faceless logistics corporation. It was the epitome of a soul-crushing job. My entire day consisted of transferring numbers from one spreadsheet to another. Click, clack, type. Click, clack, type, dot. The sound of 100 keyboards was the soundtrack to my life. A dull, constant drone that I could feel vibrating in my teeth. I was good at it because it required precision and, more importantly, it required zero human interaction. I could put on my oversized headphones, sink into my high-backed chair, a chair I was always secretly terrified of breaking, and become invisible. For 8 hours a day, I was just employee #734, a ghost in the machine. And, honestly, I liked it that way. Invisibility felt safe. My life outside of work was just as muted. I lived in a small third-floor walk-up apartment in a neighborhood that was neither trendy nor quaint. It was just there. A collection of brick buildings, a corner store that sold slightly stale bread, and a laundromat. But that apartment was my sanctuary. It was cluttered, filled with towers of second-hand books, fantasy, sci-fi, epic histories, worlds I could escape into where the heroines were never judged for their weight, only for the strength of their sword arm or the power of their magic. My favorite piece of furniture was a huge, plush, slightly lumpy armchair that I'd bought from a thrift store. It was the only place I felt truly comfortable. I'd curl up in it after work, with a bowl of something warm and cheesy, and lose myself in another universe until I fell asleep. My life was a small, quiet circle. Work, my armchair, my books. It wasn't a bad life. It wasn't exciting or glamorous or the kind of life you see on Instagram, but it was mine. It was a life built around comfort, a life designed to avoid any and all potential for judgment or pain. It was a fortress built of routine. And at the center of this fortress, the very foundation of it, was my weight. I'd been the fat girl for as long as I could remember. It wasn't a phase. It was my identity. I have this one vivid memory from when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, at a family barbecue. My uncle, a big, booming man who meant no harm, lifted me up and laughed. "Wow, Maya, you're getting solid as a little linebacker." Everyone chuckled. It wasn't malicious, but it was the first time I understood that my body was a topic of conversation, that its size was notable. My family is wonderful. I want to make that clear. They are warm, loving, Italian-American people for whom food is the primary language of love. "Are you hungry?" is our version of "I love you." "You look thin. Let me make you some pasta," is our "I'm worried about you." My grandmother's kitchen was a magical place, smelling of garlic and simmering tomato sauce and fresh-baked bread. My childhood memories are wrapped in the taste of her cannolis, the weight of a heavy lasagna pan, the joy of a second helping. They fed me because they loved me, and I ate because it felt like love. It was a beautiful, but complicated, inheritance. That love, combined with a genetic predisposition to be, well, built for comfort, not for speed, meant that I was always bigger than the other kids. In elementary school, it was chubby. In middle school, it became fatty. In high school, it was just a silent, understanding fact that I was not one of the girls who would be asked to the prom by a jock, or who could share clothes with her friends. This constant, low-level awareness of my size led to emotional eating. A bad grade on a test? A pint of cookie dough ice cream would make it better. Feeling lonely on a Friday night? A large pizza, all to myself, was my loyal companion. Food was my comfort, my celebration, my medication. It was the one thing that never judged me, never let me down. It was a warm, reliable hug from the inside out. I didn't have a medical condition, not really. My condition was a lifetime of tangled up emotions, family culture, and deep-seated loneliness that I learned to soothe with calories. I wasn't just fat. I was fortified. Every layer was a defense against a world I felt was constantly scrutinizing me. And that brings me to the antagonist of our story. Well, not her, not yet, but her world. On my daily walk home from the subway station to my apartment, I had to pass through a short 2-block stretch of street that was completely out of place in my neighborhood. It was like a little sliver of a richer, more glamorous city had been dropped into our mundane world. The sidewalks were cleaner. There were ornamental trees and wrought iron planters, and the storefronts were all chic, minimalist boutiques. And the crown jewel of this little street was a shop called Éclat. Éclat was a women's clothing boutique. But it was more than that. It was a statement. It had a single, breathtakingly beautiful outfit in its large picture window each week. Never a price tag. The name was written in a delicate gold script on the glass door. The inside was all white marble, brushed gold fixtures, and soft, warm lighting. The clothes hanging on the racks were like pieces of art. Draped silks, structured linens, cashmere that looked so soft you could feel it through the glass. I never, ever went inside. Oh my gosh, of course not. That store wasn't for me. It was for the kind of women I saw on TV shows. Women who were tall and slender, with effortless hair and perfect manicures. Women whose lives, I imagined, were as flawless and curated as the inside of that shop. Women who didn't work in data entry cubicles and eat mac and cheese out of the pot. But I was drawn to it. Every single day I would slow my walk as I approached Éclat. I'd pretend to be looking at my phone or checking my bag, but really, I was stealing glances. I was drinking it in. It was my daily dose of fantasy and self-flagellation. I'd look at the dress in the window, a flowing, emerald green silk gown, or a sharply tailored cream pantsuit, and I would imagine myself wearing it. I'd imagine the woman I would have to be to walk into that store, to have the sales associate smile warmly at me, to take that garment into a fitting room and have it glide perfectly over my body. This fantasy version of me was confident. She was successful. She was happy. She was thin. She was everything I wasn't. The moment the fantasy faded, the shame would rush back in. The store became a symbol of my otherness. It was a beautiful, gleaming wall that separated the life I had from the life I secretly, desperately wanted. It represented every party I wasn't invited to, every romance I never had, every opportunity I felt I was denied simply because of the body I lived in. It was a daily, silent reminder. You do not belong. Vionello, Alnakan. Amyana di Silabolois de Shell. Now, here's where a little piece of foreshadowing comes in. A tiny, almost unnoticeable moment of kindness that I didn't understand the significance of until much, much later. One afternoon, I was doing my usual walk-by, staring at a stunning, deep blue cashmere coat in the window of Éclat. I was completely lost in my daydream. I imagined wearing that coat on a crisp autumn day, walking through the park, feeling powerful and chic. The fantasy was so vivid, I could almost feel the soft wool under my fingertip. As I stood there, a woman came out of the small, artisanal café next to the boutique. She was older, maybe in her late 60s, with elegant silver hair cut in a stylish bob, and the kind of warm, intelligent eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. She was wearing a simple, but obviously expensive gray dress, and held a small, leather-bound notebook. She looked like she yondinged the world, but in a quiet, graceful way, not an arrogant one. I was so absorbed in my window gazing that I didn't realize I was blocking her path until she was right beside me. I jumped, startled, and mumbled an apology. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I trailed off, embarrassed. What was I going to say? I was just torturing myself by looking at things I could never have. She didn't look annoyed or impatient. She looked from my face to the coat in the window, and then back to my face. A genuine, gentle smile touched her lips. It wasn't a smile of pity. It was a smile of appreciation. "It's a beautiful color, isn't it?" she said, her voice soft and cultured. "That deep cobalt." She looked at the red, chunky knit scarf I was wearing, a scarf I had knitted myself. "It would look stunning with the color of your scarf. You have a good eye for color." I was dumbfounded. I think my mouth actually fell open. No one, especially not a woman who looked like Elathat, had ever complimented my style. My style was designed to hide me, not to be seen. "Oh, thank you," I stammered, my face flushing hot. I made this scarf." Her eyes lit up with even more warmth. "Did you now? That's wonderful. A creative spirit." She gave me one last kind smile, a little nod, and then continued on her way, leaving me standing on the sidewalk, completely stunned. The interaction lasted no more than 20 seconds. I didn't even catch her name, but it was like a tiny flicker of light in my gray, muted world. For a moment, a woman from I thought world, the Ikla world, hadn't looked at my size. She had looked at Ejme. She had seen my eye for color. She had called me a creative spirit. I held on to that feeling all the way home. It was a strange, warm little ember in my chest. I replayed her words, over and over. "You have a good eye for color." It was such a small thing, but it was a crack in the fortress. It was a tiny piece of evidence that maybe, just maybe, my worth wasn't entirely defined by the number on a clothing tag. Of course, the feeling didn't last. By the time I was back in my apartment, curled in my armchair with my comfort food, the familiar narrative crept back in. Angie was just being polite. She probably felt sorry for the fat girl staring into the expensive shop. My son, while the fortress walls rebuilt themselves, thicker and stronger than before. I dismissed the moment as a fluke, an anomaly. I didn't know then that this woman, this brief, kind stranger, was Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the original owner of Eclat, the woman who had built that boutique on a foundation of celebrating female beauty in all its forms, a vision that had slowly been corrupted by the people she'd left in charge. And I certainly didn't know that this tiny, forgotten interaction was planting a seed. It was the first faint note in a symphony of change that was about to begin. The universe was giving me a glimpse of a supporter, a key ally I didn't even know existed. But first, I had to walk through the fire. I had to meet the gatekeeper. I had to endure the moment of ultimate humiliation that would serve as the catalyst for my entire life to change. My quiet, safe, predictable life was about to be shattered. And it would all start with a simple, hopeful, and incredibly naive decision to try and buy a dress. The catalyst for my catastrophe wasn't a grand, life-altering event. It was an email. A simple, corporate email with a subject line in cheerful blue font. "You're invited. Sterling Logistics Annual Gala and Awards Night." My first instinct was to delete it. Seriously. My finger hovered over the trackpad, ready to send it to the digital trash bin where it belonged, alongside spam offers for miracle cures and notifications about company-wide fun runs. The annual gala was a legendary event within our faceless corporation. It was the one night a year the C-suite executives descended from their glass tower to pretend they knew our names. It was held at one of the city's most opulent hotel ballrooms, a place of crystal chandeliers and velvet ropes. It was, in short, my worst nightmare. It was a mandatory spectacle of social performance, a minefield of small talk, and a parade of people who looked like they belonged on the cover of a business magazine. I had successfully, and rather artfully, dodged it for the 2 years I'd been with the company. The first year, I'd claimed a family emergency. The second, a sudden and suspiciously timed 24-hour flu. But this year was different. The email contained a second line, a detail that made my stomach clench. "We will also be celebrating the exceptional performance of our data integrity division, with special recognition for our top efficiency performer." Oh, no. My boss, a perpetually stressed man named David, who communicated primarily through grunts and frantic emails, confirmed my fears an hour later. He appeared at the edge of my cubicle, a rare and terrifying occurrence. "Maya," he said, avoiding eye contact as usual. "Saw the gala email. They're giving out efficiency bonuses on stage. Your name is at the top of the list. Top of the whole company, actually. They want you there. Corporate wants a picture." He managed a weak, watery smile. "It's a big deal. Don't be sick." And then he was gone, leaving the stench of stale coffee and dread in his wake. A picture. On stage. At the gala. The words echoed in my head, each one a hammer blow against the walls of my carefully constructed fortress. My invisibility cloak was being ripped away. I wasn't going to be employee #734 anymore. I was going to be Maya, the fat girl from data entry, waddling across a stage under spotlights, in front of hundreds of perfectly coiffed, elegantly dressed people. The thought made me physically ill. A hot, prickly wave of panic washed over me. I felt my chest tighten, my breath catching in my throat. It felt like suffocation. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus. The numbers on the spreadsheet swam before my eyes. Click, clack, type. The rhythm was gone. All I could see was a mental slideshow of horrors. Me, trying to navigate a crowded ballroom, bumping into people. Me, trying to find a chair strong enough to hold me. Me, standing on that stage, the fabric of my boring black work dress straining at the seams. The camera flash illuminating every single flaw. I could already hear the whispers, feel the pitying stares. "That's her? The data whiz? Shame about her." You know. I went home in a daze. I didn't even stop for my usual comfort pizza. I walked into my apartment, my sanctuary, and it suddenly felt like a cage. My lumpy armchair seemed less like a hug, and more like a symbol of my stagnation. My books, my beloved escapes, felt like a crutch for a life I was too scared to live. For the first time, my safe, quiet world felt profoundly, deeply pathetic. And that's when the insidious little voice of hope whispered in my ear. It was a dangerous, unfamiliar sound. What if you didn't go as the fat girl in the boring black dress? What if, for one night, you went as someone else? Someone beautiful. Wanton. My mind immediately went to Eclat. The thought was so audacious, so completely insane, that I almost laughed out loud. Me? Eh? In a dress from Eclat? It was like a squirrel deciding to go shopping at Tiffany's. It was a laughable, ridiculous fantasy. But the seed had been planted. The gala was 3 weeks away. I had the bonus from the previous quarter saved up, a small nest egg I'd been hoarding for a rainy day. Well, this felt like a monsoon. The idea took root, and over the next few days, it grew from a tiny, fragile sprout into a thick, unshakable vine that wrapped around my thought. The memory of the kind woman, Mrs. Vance, floated back to me. You have a good eye for color, a creative spirit. Her words, which I had dismissed as mere politeness, now felt like a prophecy, a permission slip. Maybe I make it all. Maybe I deserve to feel beautiful, just for one night. Maybe this was my chance to stop hiding. The thought was terrifying, but it was also electrifying. It was a spark of defiance in the gray fog of my life. For one whole week, I wrestled with the idea. I would build up my courage, tell myself I was going to do it, and then a wave of self-loathing would crash over me, and I'd retreat back into my shell. Kill, I laugh at you. They'll throw you out. You don't belong there. When in downtown, I need a moisture so. But the image of myself on that stage, pathetic and ashamed in my old clothes, was a powerful motivator. The humiliation of that future was more terrifying than the potential humiliation of trying to buy a dress. I was trapped between two fears, and I had to choose the one that came with a glimmer of hope. I had to fight for myself. So, I made a plan. I would go on a Saturday. I'd take a long, hot shower. I'd do my hair and makeup, not my usual 5-minute routine, but a real effort. I'd wear my nicest, which is to say least worn, outfit, a simple dark green tunic and black leggings. I would walk into that store not as a ghost, but as a customer. A paying customer. I practiced this sentence in my head 100 times. Hello, I'm looking for a dress for a formal event. Simple. Confident. Normal. Oh, me. The Saturday arrived. A bright, crisp autumn day. The kind of day that feels full of possibility. I followed my ritual, my hands shaking slightly as I applied my mascara. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman with fear in her eyes, but also a flicker of determination I hadn't seen before. I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse with my saved-up bonus money tucked safely inside, and walked out the door. The walk to Eclat felt like the longest walk of my life. Every step was a battle between hope and terror. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The street was bustling with chic-looking people, laughing and carrying shopping bags. I felt like a lumbering elephant trying to blend in with a flock of gazelles. I almost turned back 3 times. But the memory of that kind woman's smile and the horror of the gala stage pushed me forward. And then, I was there, standing in front of a gleaming glass door with a golden script. The dress in the window that week was the one. Oh my gosh, it was the one? It was a gown the color of a midnight sky, made of a heavy liquid-like satin that seemed to drink the light. It had a classic, elegant silhouette, a gracefully draped bodice that hinted at a Grecian style, long flowing sleeves, and a skirt that fell in a perfect A-line to the floor. It wasn't flashy or revealing. It was pure, timeless elegance. It was the kind of dress that didn't wear you. It transformed you. My breath caught in my throat. I could see it. I could see myself at the gala in that dress. I wouldn't be Maya, the data entry clerk. I would be a mystery, a woman of elegance and grace. The dress was armor. It was a costume for the confident woman I longed to be. This was it. Taking one last shaky breath, I pulled open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was the silence. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a thick, expensive silence, broken only by the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the air conditioning and the soft strains of some minimalist classical music. The air smelled incredible, a subtle, clean scent of white tea and faint perfume. Everything was just as I had imagined, white marble floors that seemed to glow, brushed gold racks spaced far apart, making each piece of clothing seem like a museum artifact. The light was soft and forgiving, making everything look beautiful. For a moment, I just stood there, just inside the door, completely intimidated. This place was more than a store. It was a temple of beauty, and I felt like a blasphemer who had just stumbled through the doors. A sharp, clicking sound on the marble floor broke my trance. A woman emerged from a back room, and my heart sank into the pit of my stomach. She was the polar opposite of the kind, older woman I had met. This woman was my age, maybe a year or 2 younger. She was impossibly tall and thin, with a severe black bob haircut, sharp cheekbones and pale skin. She wore a tight, black sheath dress that was probably a size 0, and her lips were painted a deep blood red. She moved with an air of bold, practiced superiority. She was the gatekeeper. She was Chloe. Her eyes, a cold, pale blue, swept over me. It wasn't a glance, it was an assessment, a dismissal. In the space of 2 seconds, she took in my size, my simple tunic, my hopeful, terrified expression, and she judged me. A tiny, almost imperceptible smirk flickered at the corner of her perfect red lips before being smoothed away into a mask of professional indifference. She didn't move towards me. She stood behind the large marble counter, one hand resting on its cool surface, waiting. The silence stretched. It was a power play. She was making it clear that I was the intruder, that I had to be the one to bridge the gap. My carefully rehearsed line vanished from my mind. My throat felt tight and dry. Hi, I squeaked, my voice sounding small and pathetic in the vast, quiet space. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was flat, devoid of any warmth or welcome. It was the kind of voice you use on a telemarketer you're about to hang up on. "Yes," I managed, trying to inject some confidence into my tone. I'm looking for a dress for a formal event. A gala." Chloe's eyes did another slow, deliberate sweep of my body, from my sensible shoes up to my hopeful face. "A gala," she repeated, the words dripping with disbelief. It wasn't a question. It was a judgment. "Yes," I said a little more firmly this time. My initial fear was beginning to curdle into a hot, defensive anger. I was a customer. The navy blue. One, gosh, it's beautiful. "The midnight gown," she said, her tone implying I was a fool for not knowing its name. "It's from our exclusive atelier collection. A single piece." My heart leaped with a foolish, desperate hope. A single piece. Maybe it was fate. "Oh, well, I'd love to. Is it possible to try it on?" And there it was, the moment the mask of professional indifference cracked and the raw, undisguised contempt shone through. Chloe let out a small, sharp sound. It wasn't quite a laugh. It was a huff, a puff of derision. It was the ugliest sound I had ever heard. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, she smiled. She took a step out from behind the counter, her heels clicking menacingly on the marble. She walked towards the mannequin in the window, trailing one long, slender finger along a rack of silk blouses as she passed. "The atelier pieces," she began, her voice taking on the tone of a teacher explaining something to a very, very stupid child, are crafted for a very specific silhouette. The drape, the structure. It's all designed for a sample-size form. It's art, you see." She stopped beside the magnificent dress, caressing the satin fabric with her fingertips. I stood frozen, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I could feel my face burning with a shame so hot, it felt like my skin was melting. I was vaguely aware of two other customers in the store, two slender women in their 40s, who had stopped browsing and were now watching this little drama unfold with quiet, curious expression. Their attention felt like a physical weight, pressing down on me. "So, to answer your question," Chloe continued, turning her cold blue eyes back to me, her smile widening ever so slightly. "No, it's not possible." The words hung in the air, sharp and glittering and deadly. "No, but oh, yeah." My mind was reeling. The humiliation was a physical thing. It was a roar in my ears, a blackness at the edge of my vision. I felt huge, grotesque, a monstrous aberration in this pristine, perfect temple of beauty. Every single insecurity I had ever had, every cruel nickname, every pitying glance, every moment of feeling less than, it all coalesced in that one moment, in that one store, under the cold, contemptuous gaze of that one woman. But a tiny, stubborn part of me refused to break. "Not yet." My voice was trembling, but I forced the words out. Do you have it in another size? A larger one?" I was begging. I knew it. My pride was in tatters on the floor, but I couldn't stop myself. I wanted that dress. I wanted the dream it represented. I wanted her to be wrong about me. Chloe's cruel smile finally blossomed into a full, genuine, mocking laugh. It was a light, tinkling sound, but to my ears it sounded like shattering glass. She looked me up and down one last time. A slow, deliberate journey of disgust. Her eyes paused on my stomach, my hips, my arms. She saw everything I tried so hard to hide. Then she leaned in, as if sharing a secret, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, poison-laced whisper that was still loud enough for the other customers to hear. "Honey," she said, the fake term of endearment a slap in the face. "Let's be realistic." She gestured vaguely at my body with a flick of her wrist. "We don't sell tents here. We sell dresses." And then came the final, fatal blow. the words that would be seared into my brain forever. She looked directly into my eyes, her own filled with a kind of triumphant, gleeful cruelty, and said with perfect, piercing clarity, "You can't fit into this. You can't fit into any of this. This store, this world, it's not for people like you. Maybe you should try a department store. They have a plus-size section. In the basement, I think." I froze. My heart didn't just sink. It shattered. It exploded into a million tiny, jagged pieces. The air left my lungs in a single silent gasp. Her words. They weren't just words. They were stones. They were knives. They were a verdict, delivered by a judge and jury of the world I so desperately wanted to join. Not for people like you. Why? The silence in the store was absolute. The minimalist music seemed to have faded away. The only sound was the frantic, panicked drumming of my own blood in my ears. The two other customers were now staring openly, one with a shocked expression, the other with a look of pity that was somehow even worse than the contempt. It was the look you give a dog that's been hit by a car. Humiliation. It's a word we use so often, but you don't really know what it means until you felt it. It's not just embarrassment. It's a complete erasure of self. It's the feeling of your soul being ripped out of your body, leaving behind nothing but a clumsy, shameful shell of flesh for everyone to stare at. I felt transparent and horribly, monstrously visible at the same time. I wanted the marble floor to crack open and swallow me whole. I wanted to evaporate. My body, which I had spent a lifetime trying to ignore and camouflage, suddenly felt enormous, a gargantuan prison of flesh. I could feel the pressure of my clothes against my skin. I could feel the weight of my own limbs. I was nothing but my fat. In her eyes, in the eyes of everyone in that store, I was not a person. I was not Maya. I was a size, a problem, a walking, breathing punchline. My eyes started to burn with tears, hot and furious, but I refused to let them fall. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Not here. Not in her temple. I don't know where the strength came from. Maybe it came from the deepest, most wounded part of my spirit. I lifted my chin, my neck stiff, and I looked Chloe directly in her cold, triumphant eyes. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My voice was gone, trapped somewhere in my constricted throat, but I held her gaze. I let her see the pain she had caused. I let her see the silent, screaming fury that was beginning to ignite behind my eyes. For a fraction of a second, her smug expression wavered. She saw something in my eyes that wasn't shame or defeat. It was something else. Something harder. Something dangerous. Then, without a word, I turned. My movements felt stiff, robotic, like I was piloting a body that didn't belong to me. I walked towards the door. Each click of my own sensible shoes on the marble floor sounded like an accusation. I could feel their eyes on my back, the pitying eyes, the mocking eyes. It was a physical sensation, like 100 tiny needles pricking my skin. I pushed open the glass door and stumbled out onto the bright, sunny street. The cheerful, bustling world felt like a cruel joke. The cold air hit my burning face, and it was only then, safely outside the suffocating confines of Éclat, that the tears finally came. They weren't quiet, pretty tears. It was a gut-wrenching, silent sob that tore its way up from my soul. My whole body shook with the force of it. I leaned against the cold brick wall of the building next door, fumbling in my purse for my sunglasses, desperate to hide my face from the stream of weekend shoppers. I slid them on, and the world went dark, just like I wanted it to. I stood there, gasping for air, while the life I knew, the quiet, safe, invisible life I had built, crumbled into dust around me. That shop girl Chloe hadn't just insulted me. She had confirmed my deepest, darkest fear. That I was worthless. That I was unlovable. That I was not, and would never be, enough. She had held up a mirror, and the reflection she showed me was a monster. And in that moment of absolute despair, something inside me broke. It was the part of me that had always quietly accepted the judgment. The part that had always tried to be smaller, to apologize for my existence. The part that believed I deserved the whispers and the pity. It shattered into a million pieces. But as I stood there, trembling with rage and shame, a new feeling began to stir in the rubble. It was small, at first, a tiny glowing ember in the absolute zero of my despair. It was pure, undiluted, white-hot fury. Just because I'm fat, do I deserve this? Just because I'm fat, does she get to decide my worth? Does she get to tell me what world I belong in? No, babies. The word was a silent scream in my mind. No. I wiped my tears away with the back of my hand, my movements jerky and angry. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I looked back at the gleaming golden name on the glass door of Eclat. I looked at the beautiful, midnight blue dress in the window, a dress that now seemed to mock me. And I made a promise. Not to anyone else. To myself. You think this world isn't for me? I know. I thought, my silent words directed at the smug, cruel face of the woman inside. You think you can break me and throw me away? Why then? A strange, cold calm settled over me. The shaking stopped. The tears dried up. The despair was burned away by the rising fire of my rage. I'm not going to just fit into your world. I promise the beautiful, hateful store. Yeah, I'm going to own it. I'm going to come back here. And I'm going to buy you. And when I do, I am going to look you in the eye and remind you of this day. When Antoine Afanison. It was an insane, impossible thought, a fantasy born of pure, desperate rage. But it was the only thing I had. It was a lifeline. It was the beginning of my counterattack. My war had just been declared, and the first casualty had been the old me. The quiet, apologetic, invisible Maya was dead. She had died on the cold marble floor of Eclat. Someone new was about to be born from her ashes. I don't remember the walk home. It's a complete blank in my memory, a stretch of time erased by the sheer white-hot intensity of my emotions. I must have navigated sidewalks, crossed streets, waited for traffic lights, but I was a ghost piloting a body. My mind was a raging inferno, a chaotic storm of shame, rage, and a terrifying, nascent result. The face of Chloe, the shop girl, was burned onto the inside of my eyelids, her smug smile, her dismissive eyes, her blood-red lips forming those soul-destroying words. Not for people like you. When I finally came back to myself, I was standing in front of my own apartment door, my key in my hand, shaking so violently I couldn't fit it into the lock. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the air scraping my raw throat, and forced my hand steady. The lock clicked, and I stumbled inside, shutting the door behind me. My sanctuary, my fortress. It felt different now. It felt like a tomb. I dropped my purse and keys on the floor. I didn't bother taking off my shoes or my coat. I walked on autopilot into my small bathroom and flicked on the harsh fluorescent light above the mirror. And I looked. I really looked at myself for the first time in years. I had spent my entire life avoiding my own reflection. What have you said? I'd mastered the art of glancing, of seeing only my face when I brushed my teeth, of never letting my eyes wander downward. But now, I forced myself to see. I saw the tear-streaked face, the puffy, red-rimmed eyes. I saw the flush of humiliation still burning on my cheeks. I saw the soft, round curve of my chin, the thickness of my neck, the way my shoulders sloped under the weight of my tunic. I saw the body that had just been condemned, judged and dismissed as unworthy. I saw the fat girl that Chloe had laughed at. I saw the reason for every ounce of pain I had ever felt. And in that moment, looking at that tear-streaked, broken face in the mirror, something utterly bizarre happened. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. Oh my gosh, no. It was a raw, guttural, half-insane sound that bubbled up from the pit of my stomach. It was a laugh born of absolute absurdity. The absurdity of letting a stranger, a cruel, vapid girl in a clothing store, have the power to destroy me. The absurdity of spending 25 years of my life apologizing for my own existence. The absurdity of hiding in this apartment, in this lumpy armchair, in this soul-crushing job, waiting for a life that would never begin as long as I let other people write the script. My laughter mixed with a fresh wave of tears. But these tears were different. They weren't tears of shame. They were tears of fury, of release. It was a baptism of fire, right there in my dingy little bathroom. I leaned my hands on the sink, my knuckles white, and stared into my own eyes. The fear was still there, but behind it, the ember I'd felt on the street was now a raging furnace. No more, I whispered to my reflection, my voice hoarse. No more. That was my awakening. It wasn't a gentle sunrise, it was a lightning strike. It was the moment I realized that I had two choices. I could let Chloe's words be my epitaph, curl up in my armchair and eat myself into oblivion, proving her right. Or I could turn my body, my mind, my entire life into a weapon and prove her so spectacularly, so devastatingly wrong that she would regret the day she ever drew breath in my direction. I chose war. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I didn't read. I paced the floor of my small apartment like a caged tiger, the fury coursing through me like a drug. The gala was in 3 weeks. That was my first deadline. A short-term goal. But my real goal, the one that had crystallized into diamond-hard certainty in my mind, was longer term. Buying éclat de tir. It sounded insane. It wasn't insane. I had a few $1,000s in savings and a data entry job. But insanity felt like the only sane response to the situation. Vengeance was my new religion, and this impossible goal was its central prayer. I grabbed a notebook and a pen, the first act of the new Maya. At the top of the page, I wrote in big, angry letters, "The Counterattack." I divided the page into 2 columns. Column A, the body. Column B, the bank account. This was my 2-front war. One would earn me my self-respect. The other would earn me my revenge. The next morning, my old life was over. The first thing to go was the food. I went through my kitchen with the ruthlessness of a military commander. The half-eaten pint of ice cream, the bag of chips, the instant ramen, the leftover pizza, the blocks of cheese. It all went into a garbage bag. Seeing my comfort, my friends, my medication, piled up in a black plastic bag, was surprisingly emotional. It felt like a breakup, but as I tied the knot, I felt a grim satisfaction. I was severing ties with the person I used to be. My new diet was brutal. It was hell. It consisted of boiled chicken breast, steamed broccoli, brown rice, and water. So much water. Every meal was a bland, joyless exercise in fuel consumption. My body, so used to the constant influx of sugar, salt, and fat, rebelled. I had splitting headaches. I was irritable. I felt a gnawing, constant hunger that made it impossible to concentrate. The first week, I walked around in a fog of pure misery. Several times I found myself standing in front of the vending machine at work, my hand hovering over the button for a chocolate bar, my body trembling with craving. Each time, I would close my eyes and picture Chloe's smirking face. "We don't sell tents here." And the anger would come roaring back, stronger than the hunger. My anger was the fuel. It was the seasoning on my bland chicken. Next was column A's other battlefield, the gym. The gym was a place I had avoided my entire life. It was a theater of everything I wasn't: fit, strong, confident, disciplined. The thought of putting my large, clumsy body on display under fluorescent lights, surrounded by toned, athletic people, was almost as terrifying as the incident at Eclat. But terror was no longer an excuse. I found a cheap, 24-hour gym a few blocks away, the kind with no frills and equipment that looked like it had survived a war. I went at 10:30 p.m. on a Monday night, hoping it would be empty. It wasn't. There were a few serious-looking bodybuilders and a couple of women who looked like marathon runners. I felt my courage drain away. I almost turned and fled, but I forced myself to walk to the locker room, my heart hammering. Changing into my workout clothes, old, baggy sweatpants and a t-shirt 3 sizes too big, was an ordeal of shame. When I walked out onto the gym floor, I felt like every eye was on me. I was sure they were all thinking the same thing. Look at the fat girl. What's she doing here? She won't last a week. Why? I headed for the corner of the room, for the row of treadmills, wanting to hide. I got on one, my face burning, and fumbled with the controls. I just wanted to walk. To do something. I set it to a slow pace and started moving, my eyes fixed firmly on the wall in front of me, praying for invisibility. 5 minutes in, I was sweating. 10 minutes in, my calves were cramping. 15 minutes in, I decided to try running. Just for a minute. I nudged the speed up. My body protested immediately. My heavy frame jolted with every step. My lungs burned. My shins felt like they were splitting. It was excruciating. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 45 seconds, I had to stop, gasping for air, my side seized by a stitch so sharp it took my breath away. I stumbled off the treadmill, defeated, and collapsed onto a nearby bench, my head in my hands, sweat and tears of frustration mingling on my face. This was the first of many struggles. The pain was immense. Every morning I woke up with muscles so sore it hurt to breathe. There were days I was so exhausted and demoralized I couldn't get out of bed. The scale, which I forced myself to step on every morning, would sometimes refuse to budge for days on end, mocking my efforts. It felt hopeless. It felt like I was trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. But every time I wanted to quit, I had my mantra. Chloe's face. Chloe's words. I channeled all my pain, all my shame, all my rage, into every step on that treadmill, every lift of a weight. The gym stopped being a place of shame and became my crucible. The pain of the workout became a welcome distraction from the pain in my heart. I was forging a new body, and the fire was agonizing, but I could feel myself getting harder, stronger. Simultaneously, I had launched the second front of my war. Column B, the bank account. This was the real key. This was how I would buy her store. My job as a data entry clerk was a dead end. I knew that. But my boss's words came back to me. Top of the whole company, actually. I wasn't just a typist. I was efficient. I was precise. And I started to realize my real, untapped skill wasn't just transferring data. It was seeing the patterns within it. It was an analytical mind that I had been using to do little more than alphabetize spreadsheet. I needed to make money. Fast. Saving my meager salary would take decades. I needed to be bolder. Was I crazy? Absolutely. But the new Maya thrived on insanity. My research led me to the volatile, terrifying, and potentially ludicrously profitable world of day trading and cryptocurrency. It was a world of high risk and high reward, a world that operated 24/7. It was perfect. My life transformed. My apartment, once a haven of fantasy novels, became a war room. I sold my beloved book collection online, a painful but necessary sacrifice, and used the money to buy a second monitor for my computer. My nights were no longer spent escaping into other worlds. They were spent in this one, with a vengeance. I devoured everything I could find about financial markets. I read books on technical analysis, on candlestick patterns, on market psychology. I watched hours of tutorials, my eyes burning from staring at the screen. I filled my notebook not with plot summaries, but with trading strategies and stock tickers. The same brain that could spot a tiny inconsistency in a million lines of data I now applied to the frantic, jagged lines of stock charts. I started small, with a few $100s from my savings. My first trade was terrifying. I remember clicking the buy button on a volatile tech stock, my entire body trembling. I watched the line on the chart go up, then down, then up again. My heart was in my throat. I lost $37 in 5 minutes. I felt sick. It was a stupid, reckless idea. I was going to lose everything. The old Maya would have quit right there, chalking it up to another one of her failures. But the new Maya was different. I didn't see a $37 loss. I saw data. I went back to the chart, to my notes. Why did it dip? What was the news catalyst? What did the volume tell me? I hadn't failed. I had paid $37 for a lesson. So I kept going. I traded with tiny amounts, learning, refining, making mistakes and learning again. My days became a grueling, monastic routine. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., an hour on the treadmill, pushing myself harder each time. Then a quick, bland breakfast while I reviewed the pre-market news. A full day at my soul-crushing job, where I'd finish my work in half the time and secretly use the other half to research on my phone. Then home, a quick, joyless dinner, and then hours upon hours in front of my screens, trading the evening markets, studying, planning for the next day. I was running on 5 hours of sleep, pure adrenaline, and an all-consuming desire for revenge. There were setbacks. Oh my gosh, there were so many. There was a week where a bad crypto trade wiped out nearly a third of my savings. I remember staring at the screen in disbelief, the red number glowing like a wound. The despair was a physical weight. I wanted to smash my monitors. I wanted to scream. I wanted to quit. That night, I walked to the pizza place on the corner, the smell of garlic and baking dough calling to me like a siren song. I stood outside, my hand on the door, ready to give in, ready to retreat back to the comfort of my old life. And then I saw my own reflection in the glass door. I was thinner, yes. My face was less round, my jawline more defined. But it was the look in my eyes that stopped me. It was a look of tired, haunted determination. The look of a soldier in the middle of a war. And I thought of Chloe. I thought of her laugh, and I turned around and walked home. I drank a glass of water and went back to my charts. The war was not over. Slowly, painstakingly, things began to change. I learned to control my emotions, to trade with my head, not my gut. My small wins started to outnumber my losses. My trading account, which had started with a few $100s, crept past $1,000. Then 5. Then, one incredible, heart-stopping week, after a risky but well-researched bet on a biotech startup, it jumped past $20,000. I stared at the number on the screen, and for the first time in months, I cried tears of joy. Each dollar was a brick in the foundation of my new life. Each dollar was a soldier in my army. My body was changing too. The first time I ran for a full 10 minutes without stopping, I felt like I had won an Olympic medal. I started lifting weights, and I discovered a strength in my body I never knew existed. I was still fat, yes. I was not a supermodel, but I was strong. My clothes started to fit loosely. I had to punch a new hole in my belt. I looked in the mirror and saw not just a fat girl, but a work in progress. A fighter. The 3 weeks leading up to the gala passed in a blur of broccoli, treadmills, and stock charts. I was exhausted. I was sore. But I was also more alive than I had ever been in my life. I had lost a noticeable amount of weight, maybe 15 pounds, not a miracle, but a significant victory. More importantly, I had gained something immeasurable, a sense of control. The Friday of the gala arrived. I had done it. I had survived. I hadn't bought a dress. I hadn't had time. And besides, no dress from a store could ever mean what the one I was going to make would mean. Because Eleanor Vance's words had stuck with me. A creative spirit. My revenge wouldn't be complete just by buying a dress. It had to be deeper than that. I had found my real weapon. And it wasn't just a new body or a bigger bank account. It was the mind that had been there all along. The night of the gala arrived like a final exam for which I had crammed for 3 straight weeks. I was a bundle of raw, jangling nerves and a strange, steely calm. As I stood in my apartment, which now felt less like a tomb and more like a command center, I looked at the woman in the full-length mirror I'd bought. The change in 15 pounds wasn't dramatic to an outsider's eye. I was still a big girl, a plus-size woman. There was no magic transformation into a runway model. But the woman staring back at me was not the same one who had cried in the bathroom mirror. Her face was leaner, yes, but her eyes held a new light, a dangerous glint. Her posture was different. My shoulders were back. My chin was up. I was no longer trying to shrink. I was taking up my space, intentionally. And then, there was the dress. I hadn't bought a dress. The thought of stepping into another store, of subjecting myself to that potential judgment again, was unbearable. And besides, my revenge had to be more personal than that. It had to be built, not bought. Remembering Mrs. Vance's words, a creative spirit, I had taken the money I'd set aside for a dress and bought a second-hand sewing machine and the most beautiful fabric I could find online. It was a bolt of deep, luxurious crimson velvet, the color of power, of blood, of a queen's robes. For the last week, in the few hours between my job, the gym, and the stock market, I had worked on it. My fingers, nimble from years of typing and knitting, learned a new skill. I found a simple, elegant pattern online and modified it. I tailored it to my body. Not the body I wished I had, but the body I had right now. The strong, powerful body I was building. The dress I created was a masterpiece of defiance. It had a modest but striking V-neck, long sleeves that ended in a slight bell, and a fitted bodice that accentuated my waist, a waist I had never before dared to define. From there the heavy velvet fell in a perfect, sweeping line to the floor, skimming over my hips and creating a silhouette of pure, statuesque elegance. It wasn't a dress designed to make me look thin. It was a dress designed to make me look regal. It celebrated my curves instead of hiding them. It was my armor, forged by my own hands. When I walked into the grand ballroom of the hotel, I felt like I was stepping onto a different planet. The air buzzed with conversation and clinking champagne glasses. Crystal chandeliers, the size of small cars, dripped light onto a sea of people in black tuxedos and glittering designer gowns. The old Maya would have frozen at the door, turned, and fled. The new Maya took a deep breath, clenched her fists for a second, and then stepped forward, her velvet dress swishing softly around her ankles. Heads turned. I saw it happen. I saw the quick, curious glances. I wasn't invisible anymore. But the looks weren't what I had feared. It wasn't pity. It wasn't mockery. It was, surprise. It was intrigue. A few people smiled warmly. I saw a group of women from the marketing department whisper to each other, one of them giving me an appreciative nod. They didn't see Fat Maya from data entry. They saw a woman in a stunning, unusual red dress who carried herself with an unexpected, magnetic confidence. That was the real transformation. It wasn't the weight I had lost. It was the self-respect I had gained. My boss, David, saw me and his jaw literally dropped. Maya, wow, you look incredible. He was flustered, unsure how to talk to this new version of his quietest employee. The awards ceremony was the peak of the night. When they called my name for top efficiency performer, a wave of my old panic threatened to surface. The walk to the stage felt a mile long. But then I felt the soft velvet of my dress against my skin, a reminder of the promise I had made to myself. This was not a walk of shame. This was a victory lap. I walked up the stairs, my head held high. I took the glass award from the CEO, a man whose face I'd only ever seen in corporate newsletters, and shook his hand firmly. And as I stood there, Under the warm, bright spotlights, I looked out at the sea of faces. I didn't hide. I didn't cringe. I smiled. A real, genuine, triumphant smile. This was my first kill. I had faced the beast of public humiliation, and I had slain it. I was no longer afraid of being seen. The gala was the proof of concept. It proved I could do it. It fanned the flames of my resolve into a raging inferno. The next day, I was back in my war room, more focused than ever. The gala was a battle, but buying éclat was the war. The next 5.5 months were a blur of relentless, brutal, all-consuming work. The montage of my life would have looked insane. Me, at 5 a.m., on the treadmill, now running for 45 minutes straight, sweat pouring down my face. Me, at my desk, my mind a whirlwind of numbers, both for my day job and for my secret life as a trader. Me, at night, my face illuminated by the glow of 2 screens, my eyes darting between charts, news feeds, and trading platforms. I lived and breathed the market. I learned to be patient, to be ruthless, to cut my losses quickly and let my winners run. My initial $20,000 victory became 50. 50 became 100. The numbers on the screen began to feel unreal, like a video game score, but the power they represented was very, very real. My body continued to change. I lost another 40 pounds. I wasn't thin by society's standards, and I never would be. That was never the point. But I was strong. I could do pull-up. I could squat my own body weight. I discovered muscles in my back and arms and legs that I never knew a human body could possess. I swapped my baggy camouflage clothes for tailored pieces that fit my new, powerful frame. I learned about fabrics, about cuts, about what made me feel confident. I was still Maya, but I was Maya to upgraded, lethal. During this time I started my research. My target was éclat. I treated it like a hostile takeover. I spent hours in the city's business archives. I learned that the store wasn't a chain. It was a single, standalone boutique. I learned it was owned by a holding company, but the original founder was a woman named Eleanor Vance, the kind, silver-haired woman I had met on the street. She had retired 5 years ago, selling a majority stake to a small private equity firm that, from the looks of their portfolio, specialized in bleeding luxury brands dry before selling them off for par. The store was prestigious, but its profits were slipping. It was vulnerable. I hired a cutthroat commercial real estate lawyer, using a significant chunk of my trading profit. He was a shark, and I needed a shot. Through him, I made a quiet, anonymous inquiry to the equity firm. They were interested in selling. The price was astronomical, but not, to my shock, impossible. I had a target number. For the final 2 months, every trade, every workout, every waking moment was focused on that number. 6 months to the day after I had stumbled out of éclat in tears, the number in my investment account finally ticked past my target. It was time. I chose my armor for the day with meticulous care. Not a dress, but a suit. A custom-tailored pantsuit in a shade of rich, powerful cobalt blue, a nod to the coat I had once admired in the window. The fabric was Italian wool. The cut was impeccable. It screamed money, but in a quiet, dangerous way. Underneath, a simple silk shell. My hair was styled, my makeup was flawless, and on my feet were a pair of killer heels that made a sharp, confident sound with every step. I was unrecognizable. I was a predator. When I walked up to the glass door of éclat, my heart was surprisingly calm. The rage was still there, but it was no longer a wildfire. It was a cold, controlled, blue-white flame at my core. I pulled open the door. The store was exactly the same. The same expensive silence, the same minimalist music, the same scent of white tea. And behind the same marble counter stood Chloe. She looked up as I entered, and her entire demeanor changed instantly. The bored, arrogant look on her face vanished, replaced by an obsequious, hungry smile. She saw my suit, my expensive handbag, my air of quiet authority, and her mind rang with the sound of a massive commission. She didn't recognize me, not even a flicker. To her, I was just a different type of person, a person who belonged. "Good afternoon, welcome to Eclat," she cooed, her voice sickly sweet. She glided out from behind the counter, her eyes scanning my outfit with professional appreciation. "That is a magnificent suit. Are you looking for anything in particular today? Or just browsing?" I let the silence hang for a moment, savoring it. I walked slowly past her, my heels clicking on the marble. I ran a hand over a rack of cashmere sweaters. "I'm not sure," I said, my voice low and even. "Everything is so specific." "Of course," she said, eager to please. "Our pieces are for a discerning clientele. If you tell me the occasion, I can certainly help you curate a look." I turned to face her, a small, cold smile on my lips. "The occasion is business," I said. I looked around the pristine store, at the artfully spaced racks, the glowing lights. "I'm thinking of making an acquisition in the retail space. Something with good bones, but perhaps poor management." Chloe's professional smile faltered for a fraction of a second, confused. "Oh, well, we are considered the height of—" "Tell me, Chloe," I interrupted, my voice still soft, but with an edge of steel that cut through her sales pitch. She froze. Her eyes widened. The smile vanished. "I'm sorry, how do you know my name?" I took a step closer, and now I let her see it. I let her look past the suit, past the makeup, and into my eyes. The same eyes she had looked into 6 months ago, as she delivered her verdict. I watched the gears turn in her head. I saw the flicker of confusion, the dawning horror, and then the sickening gut punch of recognition. Her face went pale, the blood draining away until her skin was the color of chalk. Her blood-red lipstick stood out like a gash. "You," she whispered, her voice a strangled squeak. She stumbled back a step, as if I had physically struck her. "Oh my God, it's you." "Me," I confirmed, my voice a blade. "The fat girl, the one who doesn't belong in your world, the one you sent to the basement." She stared, speechless. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. The professional mask was gone, shattered. All that was left was a terrified, pathetic girl. I don't, you look," she stammered. "Different?" I offered, "Yes. A lot can change in 6 months. It turns out, humiliation is a powerful motivator. You should try it sometime." I gave her a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. "But don't worry. I'm not here to try on the midnight gown. Though I'm sure you could find a tent for me in the back now, couldn't you?" Her face crumpled. This was the moment, the begging. "Please," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I'm so sorry. I was having a bad day. I'm not. I didn't mean it. Please, don't report me to my manager. I need this job." I almost laughed. The sheer, pathetic weakness of her. I shook my head slowly. "Report you to your manager?" "Honey," I said, throwing her own fake endearment back at her like a poisoned dart. "You're not thinking big enough." Just then, the glass door opened again. My lawyer, a sharp man in an even sharper suit, walked in, carrying a leather briefcase. He nodded at me. "Maya, everything is ready." I turned my back on the trembling Chloe and addressed my lawyer. "Perfect. Is the final paperwork signed?" "Signed, sealed, and delivered this morning," he said, his voice echoing in the stunned silence. "The holding company accepted your final offer. As of 9 a.m. this morning, you are the sole proprietor of Eclat Boutique, its assets, and its inventory." I turned back to Chloe. The look on her face was a masterpiece of pure, unadulterated horror. It was more satisfying than I could have ever imagined. So you see, I said, my voice dropping to a calm, businesslike tone, I don't need to report you to your manager. Because, as of this morning, I'm your manager. I let that sink in. And my first act as the new owner is to inform you that your services are no longer required. You're fired. She collapsed, not literally, but her entire body seemed to cave in on itself. No. Please. You can't. The tears were streaming down her face now, ruining her perfect makeup. I'll do anything. I'll work for free. Please, I need this job. I have rent. I have rent. You should have thought of that 6 months ago, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. I felt nothing for her tears. No pity, no sympathy. Just a vast, cold emptiness where my revenge was supposed to be. You didn't just have a bad day. You're a cruel person. You enjoyed hurting me. You feed on making other people feel small. But my world doesn't have room for people like you. Now please, gather your personal belongings and see yourself out. I watched her, a broken, sobbing mess, scurry to the back room. The victory felt hollow. The rage was gone, and in its place was just quiet. I had done it. I had won. But the person I had truly defeated wasn't her. It was the girl who had let her words have power in the first place. This whole journey, I thought it was about revenge. But standing there, in Yolme's store, I realized it was never about Chloe. She was just the catalyst. She was the random, meaningless spark that lit the fuse on a bomb that had been building inside me for 25 years. The war was never against her. It was against myself. Against the part of me that believed I was worthless. Being fat is not a sin. I looked at my reflection in a darkened mirror on the wall. At my strong, powerful body in its cobalt blue suit. I was still a plus-size woman. And for the first time I felt beautiful. Not in spite of it, but because of it. It was part of my story, part of my strength. The real sin, the real ugliness, is giving up on yourself. It's letting the clothes of the world define your worth. It's staying in the shadows because you're afraid of the light. To all of you watching, to anyone who has ever been made to feel small, to anyone who has been mocked, dismissed, or humiliated because of how you look, I need you to hear me. Do not believe their words. Their cruelty is not a reflection of you. It is a reflection of their own emptiness. The power they have over you is the power you give them. Take it back. You are stronger than you think. You are more capable than you can possibly imagine. Find your fire, whether it's a tiny ember or a raging inferno. Protect it. Feed it. Let it burn away all the doubt and the shame, and let it forge you into the person you are always meant to be. The journey is hell, I won't lie to you. But on the other side of that hell is a strength, a peace, and a self-love that no one can ever take away from you. So, what happened next? That's the question I get asked a lot. Did I keep the store? Did I become a fashion mogul, lording it over my little empire of silk and cashmere? The thought is tempting, I admit. A real Pretty Woman fantasy ending. But the truth is, my war was never about owning a store. It was about owning my story. The day after I restructured my staff, I spent hours walking through my new, empty, silent boutique. I touched the fabrics, not with the longing of an outsider, but with the critical eye of an owner. And I realized my passion wasn't in selling these clothes. My passion was in the fight itself. The fire that had forged me into this new person wasn't a love for fashion. It was a love for my own survival, my own potential. The store was a symbol, a battlefield. And once the war was over, I had no use for the battlefield anymore. It felt cold, empty. The victory was in the journey, not the destination. So, I made a call. It took some digging, but my lawyer was a shark, remember? I found her. Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the old Johan. The woman who had shown me a flicker of kindness when I needed it most. We met for lunch at that same little cafe next to the store. See you in the store. I told her everything. I told her about her compliment, how it had planted a tiny seed of hope in the barren soil of my self-esteem. I told her about Chloe, about the crushing humiliation, and about the insane, obsessive 6-month war I had waged in response. She was utterly horrified. She listened with tears in her warm, intelligent eyes. She told me she had sold her controlling interest because she was tired and wanted to retire, but she'd had no idea the soul of her store, her life's work, had been so thoroughly corrupted. Her original vision for Eclat was never about exclusion. It was about celebrating the art of being a woman, in all her magnificent and varied form. We talked for hours, and then we had another lunch, and another. Over those weeks, a new plan formed. A better one. A true victory. My revenge was never going to be complete by simply taking something from someone who had hurt me. It would only be completed by building something better in its place. I sold Eclat back to Eleanor Vance for $1. There was, however, one condition: that she use my investment, because I insisted on becoming a silent partner and funding the venture with a portion of my trading profits, to gut the store's old toxic philosophy. They would relaunch, not just with sample sizes, but with a true, beautifully crafted, genuinely inclusive line that catered to women of all shapes. From petite to plus size, every single woman who walked through that door would be treated not like a size, but like a queen. The new collection, aptly named the Eleanor, launches this fall. And the midnight gown? It will be the signature piece available for anyone, in any size, who wants to feel its magic. My real counterattack wasn't buying her store. It was giving it back its soul. That is a victory that feels warm, not cold. It's a victory that builds something, instead of just destroying. This story, wow. It was one of the hardest I've ever had to tell. Reliving that shame, that suffocation, that white-hot rage. It's not easy. It takes a piece out of you. But sharing it with all of you here in our community makes it feel less like a scar and more like a badge of honor. Your support, your presence, is what makes that possible. It gives me the courage to open these vaults. And that's why I need you to do me a favor. If this story touched you, if it fired you up, if it made you feel seen in any way, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to hit that little notification bell, because our stories are a conversation, and I don't want you to miss the next chapter of our journey together. Now I want to hear from you. Seriously. This is the most important part. What was your éclat moment? What was that one comment, that one person, that one event that pushed you to your breaking point and made you say, no more? Share your counterattack story in the comments below. I want to hear about your wars, your victories, your struggles. I promise you, I will read every single one. Your stories give me strength, just as I hope mine has given you a little bit of strength today. We are not alone in this fight. We are an army. Thank you for listening. Remember to be kind to yourself, because you deserve that kindness. But always, always be a warrior for yourself, because you are worth fighting for. Love you all, your Maya. See you in the next story.